Hello everyone. My name is Joanna the Beast, and I've just finished what I would like to call the first chapter of what would you call it? A writing I'm working on. It's in the rough draft, but I'd love to share it with you. So, enjoy. Harriet and Alfie were having a quiet evening, seemingly for the first time in months. Weeks and weeks of pestering had finally ceased after Jay was arrested. No more voice messages, texts, handwritten notes laced with venom. It wasn't as if they wanted to get rid of her. She really had been a fine friend before slipping into whatever state this is, but they weren't going to complain about the peace. It was something stupid, really. She went and climbed the old concrete mill in the middle of town. No real reason to do so, just a dumb stunt to prove she could. The city government labels it as a piece of historical architecture, so the hammer came down ever harder. Far from being her first venture into erraticism, Jay had been truly off the wall for the period preceding her arrest. She drank too much, stayed up all night, left frankly worrying messages written for seemingly nobody but herself. Most would agree that it's probably for the best that she's in the hands of the police. There, she might get the care that she's been avoiding. "Could you grab another beer?" Harriet slurred, her demeanor making it clear that she had no intention to part herself with the couch. Alfie relented silently, knowing that any attempt to get Harriet moving would only lengthen the ordeal. He padded slowly to the kitchen and fumbled for the light switch. Things like this were made slightly more difficult when stoned, though you wouldn't recognize this from talking to him. Nonetheless, he turned the garbage disposal on, creating a terrible racket involving a butter knife and a bottle cap. Alfie rubbed his eyes, momentarily disoriented from the unexpected ruckus. He opened the fridge, and a distinctly beer-free environment welcomed him. Sighing, he turned around and returned empty-handed. "We're out of booze. Up for some reefer?" Alfie asked, hoping she wouldn't suggest a trip to the store. "How about a trip to the store?" Harriet suggested. "Sounds great," Alfie said, already trudging upstairs to grab Harriet's keys. "Hon, could you grab my keys?" asked Harriet, blissfully unaware that her inadequacies were an integrated and expected part of her character. Alfie didn't bother with a response, and they left their apartment shortly thereafter. 3 days earlier. Jay was sitting in her apartment. Jay was alone in her apartment. Jay was thinking very hard about what she wants to do. Jay was thinking very hard about what she can do. There are so many things a person could do with their day. They could go to 1,000 different places and do 1,000 different things. What could she do today, though? What could she do now? She had to do something. She had to stop thinking about them. She had to make something change. Things weren't changing. Things were staying the same. What a mess. What a terrible, terrible mess. She should leave her apartment. She should walk somewhere. She should find something. Leaping to her feet, she threw on her shoes and went outside. No, she didn't go outside. She tried to go outside. She got to the door. She stopped at the door. She reached for the handle, then put her hand back down. She glanced at the peephole nervously. She could see out of it. The world looked as if it were in a funhouse mirror. Jay wished her house was a fun house. What an unfun house it was! Nobody was playing or laughing or dancing. She stepped to the side. If she could see through her peephole, could other people see in? Slowly, she returned to the peephole. Nothing but her neighbors' doors. Nobody was outside. But what if they were looking through their peephole into her peephole? Is that possible? She felt like it was, and that's just not right. That's just terrible. Everyone deserves their privacy. She marched to her toolbox and grabbed a roll of duct tape. "You will fix it and you'll make it better. I'll put you over the place where they stare unfettered," she whispered to the tape. Duct tape fixed approximately half of the problems in her life, as imaginary or grounded in reality as they may be. She applied a square strip of tape over her peephole. That wasn't enough. What if they could see through one measly layer of duct tape? She stepped outside and applied another strip on the outside of her door. Why haven't all of her neighbors done this? Is she the only non-voyeur on the floor? She applied a strip to each of her neighbors' doors, happy that she could help. So many people needed her help. So many people needed her to guide them, but they just wouldn't listen. They don't think that she could fix it, but she knows she could. Everybody was miserable and everything was bad, so why weren't they letting her fix it? She mulled over this as she walked down the street. Houses turned to blocks, turned to miles before she realized what the problem was. She had to get their attention, that's all. People needed her help, but they didn't know she could give it. Over the treetops, the old concrete mill came into view. She stopped dead in her tracks and stared. It was beautiful, and it was huge, and she knew that if she just got to the top, then everybody would be able to hear her. Everybody would want to hear her. With new vigor, she skipped down the street. Today would be a wonderful day indeed. 3 days later, Harriet and Alfie were at the 24-hour supermarket, standing in the alcohol section. Alfie projected the appearance of someone who was deciding, but he had already made up his mind. Agree with whatever Harriet says and get out of here ASAP. He didn't know why, but this place gave him the creeps. Maybe it was the lofty ceilings or the warehouse look. Maybe it was nothing at all, and he simply felt that way. What do you think about a Mikey's Light? Asked Harriet, swaying slightly on her feet. That sounds great, babe, said Alfie, already reaching for the box. Well, now that I'm looking at it, what about a Muller's Full? Harriet spoke, brow furrowed. This might be the hardest she's thought all day. Sure. Alfie grabbed the case and attempted to leave the aisle. Wait, what am I thinking? We haven't even looked at the wine, exclaimed Harriet. You can pick it out. I've got to use the bathroom. Alfie excused himself in the direction of the bathroom, but found himself in front of the lottery machine. Glowing lights and flashing colors, its very presence tempted him. He had lost the last couple of tickets he bought, but surely that wasn't a streak that would hold. It couldn't. He bought a $20 ticket, scratched it off, won $10, spent it on a $10 ticket, and ended up with nothing. By then, Harriet had, finally, figured out which flavor of poison she wanted to sedate herself with tonight. Alfie felt as if his presence had been unnecessary, but at least it was over. They piled into Harriet's truck and started on their way home. Three days earlier. It was exhilarating. More than she had hoped for. The sky was a beautiful gray, the temperature an ideal 65 Fahrenheit. She couldn't have asked for a better setting for this adventure. The mill wasn't replete with handholds, but there were enough she was confident she wouldn't fall. By the time she was around halfway up, the yelling started. She couldn't quite tell what they were saying, but their sentiment wasn't hard to guess. Way back when this town had been getting its bearings, the mill had employed half the town. Now, it stood primarily as decoration. Why shouldn't she climb it? Nobody else is using it. It's just sitting there. A megaphone blared. Jay didn't bother turning to see who it was. What did they matter? They were down there, and she was up here. They couldn't possibly reach her, not with how high she was. It occurred to her then that if she did fall, they would have to scrape her off of the pavement. But why would she go and do that? With each foot she raised herself, she felt somehow more powerful, more sure that this was the right decision. How could it not be? A whole crowd was gathering down below. Things were in motion. She was changing things. She was helping them. The top wasn't far away now. It's possible she was the very first person to climb the mill. Jay was honored. She felt great. There were more shouts. The man with the megaphone did more blabbering, but what did she care? They were here to hear her message. They were here today for what she was doing. She was special, and she was important. Finally turning around, she prepared to greet her followers. Strangely, they were primarily cops and firefighters. But she couldn't be Piggy. Not on her very first message. Her message. What should she tell them? What wisdom should she bestow? It was very, very important to her she didn't ruin this first speech. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm sure that you are wondering why I brought you all here on this beautiful day. Don't you ever wonder why there are so many cars driving? Why there are so many more cars than there are people? It's simple. They're paying agents to flood the road. You think you're surrounded by your friends and family, your community, but you're not. They're surveilling us at a massive scale. We need to stop them. We need to get them out of our city, and we need to come together to make sure this never, ever happens again. The words flowed from Jay like water. She felt like a god. She could do no wrong. She knew the truth, and she would share it with her city. Around 75 feet below, Fire Chief Wright scratched her head. They had a life net stretched out, but she didn't look like she was going to jump. There was some shouting, but apart from a weird word here and there, it was unintelligible. She raised the megaphone to shout every now and then, but it didn't look like the girl was even listening. She just kept on with her shouting, something about fake cars. Wright much preferred to let the police deal with the crazies, but the fire department was better equipped for when they went and climbed something. She almost preferred when they jumped. At least they got it over with quicker. This was starting to look like a huge pain in the ass, the type where you'll still be filing paperwork for it in a month's time. Jay's voice was hoarse from shouting. It didn't make her very happy that she had to compete with that bitch with a megaphone. What did she think she was doing on Jay's big day? Jay didn't get a megaphone. No! Jay has to use her voice, her own strength. She doesn't get a machine to amplify her message, and she doesn't need one. Once it was clear to her that her voice wasn't miraculously going to heal in time for another speech, Jay began her descent. Much less frantic than her ascent, it took her almost 15 minutes to get down. Far from the fanfare she expected, handcuffs greeted her at the bottom. Three days later. Can you just wait until we're home? Pleaded Alfie, not particularly interested in bailing Harriet out of another DUI. It doesn't fucking matter, we're like almost there, muttered Harriet, taking another drink. Besides, I'm already drunk anyway. Alfie sat rigid in his seat, trying to keep his breathing even. Harriet veered slightly into the opposing lane before swerving back into her own. Do you think that Jay will... started Harriet. I don't want to talk about her, stated Alfie, flatly. Fuck. She's finally out of their hair, but Harriet won't shut up about her. That chapter of their life had closed, and Alfie would be more than happy to leave it behind. Harriet pulled into their apartment, almost parked within the lines. The other spot was theirs anyhow, and it's not as if anyone was going to use it. She stumbled halfway to their door, then realized the truck was unlocked. Babe, can you lock my door? I forgot. The words fell from her mouth like molasses. Alfie, who was already at the door, keys in hand, shot a glare at Harriet. Come on, my hands are full. Harriet gestured to the six-pack with her unused hand. Alfie tossed the keys at Harriet, then trudged to the fucking truck. He loved her, but among her qualities, this was the worst. He opened the door, pushed down the lock, then returned to their apartment. Harriet was still standing there, and offered the keys back to Alfie. Unsurprising. He snatched the keys and put them in the lock, but something was wrong. The door was already unlocked. I remember locking the door when it left. Did you unlock the door? Asked Alfie, confused. No, my hands are full, said Harriet, a shit-eating grin plastered on her countenance. Alfie ignored this and stepped inside. Whatever. 2 days earlier. Jail? They put her in jail? Jay had been the very first to have climbed the tower. She tried warning them, and they put her in jail? She paced herself. This was all wrong. It was very, very wrong. Did they work for them? The agents in cars and the police and the fire department? Oh, fuck! The whole system. It was all working against her. She was alone. She was alone and she wasn't at home. She was in a stinking fucking cell. I want a public defender. I want a lawyer. I want a team of lawyers. Do you know who I am? Do you know the movement I represent? She shouted. No response. No response came from her captors. Nothing. They ignored her words. Her words. This wouldn't do. No, this wouldn't do at all. How is she supposed to save them when the whole system was against her? How is she supposed to unite all peoples against their common threat? She sat down on her cell's cot, and a plume of dust rose as she did. Dirty, stinking cell. Dirty fucking cops. And that bitch with a megaphone, who did she think she was? Interfering in her message. Her mind flashed to Harriet and Alfie. How sad that made her. How mad that made her. How she felt. Oh, how she felt. They had to be behind it too. They hate her, and they did this to her on purpose. Now she knew what she could do. Now she knew the enemy that was. First, though, the bitch with the megaphone. First her first. She rattled her bars, made a mess of her cell. She yelled and yelled and yelled. But nobody answered. Nobody cared. She fell on her back, staring at the ceiling. Just like it is at home. Same shit. Who cares? But the ceiling isn't like it is home. No, this is like an office. Her house had popcorn ceilings. She could go for some popcorn. As she kept staring at the ceiling, a realization dawned. It's like an office. The tiles break away. They can be moved away. She doesn't need a fucking lawyer. She doesn't need a fucking savior. She can do it herself. She can do it all herself. Nobody wants to listen, so it's in her hands. The ball is in her court. Grinning. So happy. She felt so happy. She grabbed the bars, peered through them, making sure nobody was watching. And nobody was. They never were. If she can yell without causing concern, climbing should be fine. Climbing's what she does. She grabbed the bars and hoisted herself up, pushed aside a ceiling tile and hoisted herself up there too. She knew she had to be careful. She knew that the ceiling could fall down if she slipped, but she was stable. She had footing. Now she had to find their armory. If she just had 1,000 bullets, surely she could get them all. And a bullet had never, ever hit her. She doesn't think that they can, frankly. But she has to be sneaky. It's not bullets that will kill her, but chains. She escaped this time, but if they got her again, it could be over. She might not be so lucky. It took her minutes to find their armory. Mere minutes. How great at this she was. She slipped down, lithe as a cat, and made her selection. Yes, a handgun was perfect. Small and easy to hide. No one would even know she had it. And if they caught her, she could use it to blow them away! She would blow them away like they all deserved. Escaping the building was trivial. Just more climbing. She got to the roof, found a side of the building that was inconspicuous, and clambered down. Sprinting through the streets, she was laughing, crying, smiling, sobbing. She felt everything, and she felt it harder than she ever had before. There were people that had hurt her, people that had to pay. She pulled the gun out of her pocket and leered at it in wonder. Now she had the means.